We will get started shortly, I promise. Side? Okay. Welcome. And I've been running the Internet of Things Scotland community for exactly 2 years today. Our very first Internet of Things, thank you, meetup in Edinburgh was 2 years exactly to the day. But this is only our second Glasgow IoT meetup. Now, some of you, there's a little bit of confusion in that there is another IoT meetup, IoT Glasgow, and hence, because I've been running IoT meetups in Edinburgh, we rebranded as IoT Scotland so that we could run IoT events in other cities, including Glasgow. We've done in Dundee and hope to do them in other cities to build a community. So we've got about 1,000 and between 1,000 and 1,100 members, and we tend not to get too technical because I think there's so many other very technical meetups. You know, if you really want to get sort of down and dirty with code, you can go to the C++, the Java, the Python. There's the tech meetup in Edinburgh. I don't know if there's the equivalent in Glasgow, but what I prefer to do is look at IoT and think how strategically the technology will have an impact on certain verticals, whether it's fintech, medical, industrial, consumer, drones, smart tech, robots. You know, I like to keep it varied. We initially tried to do kind of themed events. So 1 month we do smart cities and we do wearables. But it was actually really difficult to find 3 speakers that had a kind of a consistent stranded in terms of domain expertise. So now we just get a nice eclectic group, and as long as it relates to the Internet of Things in some capacity, we're happy to invite them along. So the format is generally the first kind of opportunity is for you guys to share with the community whether you're maybe hosting an event, or there's an IoT conference coming up, or you're working on a particular project, or you're looking for collaborators, or you just want to sort of share something that you've sort of seen in the trade press that's IoT related. So this is what I call open forum. So is there anything that you want to sort of discuss, talk about, mention to the group, share with the group? Go for it.
So when I'm asking, one of the things which kind of came onto my kind of desk beginning this week was ScotRail are running a 8-week competition focusing on disruption management and also destination management. So it's I think it's going to look at this as if it's kind of pan-UK opportunity, proposing the 13th of July, and they're obviously kind of looking into using kind of the Wi-Fi in trains as a means of connectivity, but it's not focusing in on whilst you're in the train. It's when you're actually kind of at the stations and vice versa. So that's an open competition challenge, and companies get access. I think they get some funding to develop a brief, and also then the ones that are selected then go into an 8-week program, kind of incubator, and be located at any location, any incubation location. So it's online, so just this Project Swift, I think it's called, but it's quite hard to find.
You see that? I love that approach in terms of open innovation. Big companies, previously they may have thought, we have a monopoly on good ideas. We spend a lot of money, a significant amount of money on R&D, so we must have a solution for this problem. And increasingly, there's more of an open culture to say, let's just throw out these innovation challenges in forms of problems that we will actually pay people to solve, and we don't care who those people are, whether they're early stage startups, lone individuals, academics, other companies, and putting forward a challenge that others can actually solve makes so much more sense than this other approach I see all the time of entrepreneurial academics who have developed some kind of quite obscure technology as a result of a PhD thesis, and it's a solution looking for a problem, right? Exactly. So that just seems like such a waste of effort.
Not actually find an enterprise client that's got a checkbook, cash, and a problem to solve, and you can come along and actually solve that problem. When is that actually taking place, Alistair?
Well, there's a webinar, I think, the first week of July, and then it's not location as in you don't have to. It's not like
it's like a virtual accelerator program.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you email me the details and I can push it out to the group via the newsletter? So, anyone else? Alison, you must be working on something exciting.
Well, I'm involved with the Machine Learning Club in Glasgow.
Machine Learning Club.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
So there's a meet-up group for that, Glasgow AI, and there's people doing various projects. They've kind of started now, but if anyone's really keen, they can get involved.
How many people belong to that meetup group? About 30 to 40. Because when I think of AI, I kind of think slightly more of Edinburgh as being a hub of excellence, because Edinburgh University Informatics is, I believe, #1 in Europe for pure research in AI. And so I don't sort of think necessarily I'm going to get myself in trouble, because I'm in Glasgow right now, but I don't sort of necessarily associate Glasgow with being a hub of AI excellence. But yeah, there's no AI meetup in Edinburgh as far as I know, is there? No, I don't think so. Anyway, good job, excellent. So, I think if there are no more questions, announcements, or anything else, I think we should, before we continue, in order to keep these events free, I just wanted to thank our sponsors. So, Spring Technology, Damien at the back there, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For covering it's basically a, not infinite sadly, but a tab behind the bar. So help yourself to some drinks and snacks and what have you. I'd also like to thank Product Forge for continuing to support us, filming the events, pushing out the live feed, and they're just doing such an awesome job. And also, they do, Alan and his team, kind of hackathons, very much along the lines of what I was telling you about, getting a bunch of very, very bright, capable people in a room for a long weekend. Actually, longer than a weekend, it's Thursday to Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Working on solving problems that usually relate to positive social impact, so health. Do you want to just say a few words quickly?
We've got a few events coming up, planning 2 health-focused medical visualization and Future Health 2, which will focus on NHS data. And also we're working with Scotland and Shelter Scotland on an event focused around the private rental sector as well. So if you're interested in any of those topics, then get in touch. We're also looking at sustainability, smart cities, transport, all sorts of other topics as well. And yeah.
Perfect. Brilliant. So in terms of format, real quick, 3 speakers tonight, each around 20 minutes, short networking break in between, and then we'll take that, that's why these chairs are here, we're going to take them to the front and then do an open Q&A. So rather than if you have any burning questions after each speaker, go ahead, but what I prefer to do is keep the questions at the end and then have this kind of open dialogue Q&A at the end of the 3 talks. Sound good? All right, are you ready? Okay, go for it. You want to run it from your... Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Blockchain and IoT, 2 of my favorite things.
Yeah, 2 assignments favorite things in 1 sentence.
Yes. Round of applause. Hold on. Oh, I gotta mic you up. Right. This seamless professional. For the millions of people following the live feed, I'm so sorry. There you go. Apparently a lot of people watching the football tonight. It's a big game.
So that's what we're in competition with.
Yeah, you can't really compete against the Premier League. That's a tough gig. Anyway, over to you. No pressure.
Something happened.
Oh,
That's weird.
that's a bit weird.
It was working fine a moment ago.
Yeah, there we go. Let's try it again. Where's the mouse going? There we go. Second time lucky. So blockchain and IoT are two things that we don't tend to put together. We're going to think about, are they something we can make happen, or are they just this kind of unlikely pairing of two buzzwords? Because let's put it this way, blockchain's a massive buzzword and IoT's a massive buzzword. Can we make them work together? Is it possible? So when we think of blockchain, we tend to think of, not power efficient. There was meant to be a picture of a big, massive power station there, because what happens, well, blockchain uses an absolutely massive amount of energy. One Bitcoin transaction at the minute is using about the same amount of energy as a US household uses in an entire day. And that's one transaction. You can fit 100, 200 transactions into a block, and you get one of those every 10 minutes. So that's a lot of power that's getting used. In fact, I think the whole Bitcoin network at the moment is using about the same amount of power as Denmark. Yeah, oops. It used to actually be even worse. It was 1.5 times that, because previously people were mining on their general purpose computers. So they were mining their Bitcoins on their computers, burning power quite literally into heat. So I remember back when the Bitcoins first started, I used to joke about using your computer as a space heater in the office, and actually it was quite an efficient form of heating, and it still is if you can do it well. So that's not the point in Bitcoin, but I thought I'd start with that to just pivot that into IoT, that we try and make things last for 10 years on a battery. Well, we're not going to be mining on IoT, so we can start with that. Mining is really wasteful. There's reasons for it. We can talk briefly about that. This is not a blockchain talk. There's no math, there's no equations, and there's no circuit diagrams. But it's important for transaction verification. We have to do mining. We just have to accept that it's there for good reason. But it's a bit of a balancing act, because we need this proof of work, but we're trying to do something with, we're trying to do something with blockchain, but we have to accept the proof of work's there. So let's not mine, okay? If we want to send something to blockchain from an IoT device, that's practical. We can do this. If we want to make a transaction, so in blockchain everything needs to be a transaction of some kind. We take an incoming unspent transaction if you want to work with Bitcoin, for example. So something we've received that we've not used already. We're then going to make some recipients and some amounts. We're going to sign that with the right key, and the right key is from the one that received the money. And then we broadcast it out to the network. If we're being IoT, then we probably don't want to broadcast. We probably want to forward it to a relay node that can then do the broadcasting for us, because having to stick around and broadcast to lots of people isn't very efficient in terms of power usage. So probably more sensible to forward to a relay. But we can make a transaction. That's fairly straightforward. It's a predictable power drain. It's predictable amount of time it's going to take. Nice and simple. If you are using Bitcoin, be very cautious of fees. The minimum that you'll really be paying for a Bitcoin transaction was about $5 or $6 recently per transaction. So Bitcoin that used to be useful to send someone $1, nah, you wouldn't want to do that. So you'd need to look at an alternative blockchain. In terms of use cases though, for this sort of being able to transmit, why would we want to do this on an IoT device? Well, we can store audit logs. So if you've got logging or some kind of data on a device that you think, I want to store this somewhere where it can't be tampered with, it can only be appended, it can never be mutated, nobody can come along and clear them out, and it might work there. Or if you've got measurements, readings, data where perhaps people don't trust each other, you need to collate it together across multiple different places, then you could send those measurements or those readings to a blockchain. Obviously though, there are cost implications of doing this when it's $5 or $6 to use Bitcoin, so you'd have to probably use another type of chain. You could use it to initiate financial transactions or payments cryptocurrency. An example of this, I suppose, if you want to think about it, would be the Bitcoin ATMs, where people can effectively put cash in the machine or use a credit card payment and then receive Bitcoin. So that's initiating a transaction based upon that. And you can use it to timestamp information as well, because once you put something in the chain, Everyone can kind of verify where it is in the chain, how far back it is, and then roughly when it was put in the chain. So there's the kind of 4 things we can do as an IoT device if we can just transmit into the blockchain. But if we want to receive, this might be more useful, I would argue, for IoT, but it's actually much harder to do. So if we were to receive things from blockchain, we could interact with smart contracts, smart property, so tokens and these sorts of things. We'd be able to, for example, have an IoT device like a door lock on an Airbnb, where somebody that rents the Airbnb engages in a smart contract, and that specifies a start and an end time of the rental, and during that period, the corresponding key would be able to operate the door lock. All sorts of things like that. You could do it for cars, pretty much anything. You could even do it for public transport if you wanted. You could use to see if payment services have been made, and if someone's paid for something, they can use it, and if they're not paid for it, then they can't. And you can use it to receive funds and check timestamps, see if things are there, things have happened, that sort of thing. So these could be quite useful for IoT devices, because I'm thinking, you could think about the different sorts of things that you could build and integrate with, a couple of actuators, some kind of sensors or things like that. Oops. So different sorts of things could actuate and work with, and engage in the real world. But the problem that we face is power consumption. If we need to receive, we have to do quite a lot of things. So we need to check that a block has got that valid proof of work we talked about earlier. We need to make sure that someone did a lot of mundane, boring, repetitive, hard power consumption work, right? Just to make sure that that block is real. Once we've done that, we have to verify that the transaction is actually in the block. Then we have to go through a Merkle tree of transactions. So what that means is there's loads of transactions in this fancy structure, and we have to parse through the structure and hash up each and every transaction. It gets quite boring and slow. Then we need to verify the input signature in each transaction. Verifying signatures is pretty slow. That's quite annoying as well. And if you've got multiple inputs to a transaction, then you have to verify for each input. So if you want to talk computer science, which I hate, it's ON. This is not ON in any way. This is kind of ON squared or cubed, or something that's not scalable. And people have even been talking about blocks. People could build transactions that actually would take potentially longer to verify than they would to mine. So this is something that's a real problem when you're running on a little ARM Cortex. Then we need to find if there's actually a transaction that is useful to us. So blockchain's been designed with the kind of assumption that we don't trust anybody, but who cares if we use loads and loads and loads of power? When you're on a little IoT device that's just woken up on its Cortex M1, that's a bit of a problem. And then finally, we advance the state record of our network. So check if anything happens. So did someone pay me? Did something happen that I need to know about? Did a smart contract get triggered? But blockchain doesn't convey state. So what I mean by that, to elaborate on that a bit more, is conveying state would be a bit like saying, right, Simon's got £100 and I've got £100. Okay, now Simon's got 120 and I've got 80. That would be conveying state information. What blockchain does is it conveys changes. So it says, I've given Simon £20. You have to know how much I had beforehand and how much he had beforehand in order to actually work that out and then work out how much everyone now has. We don't convey that in blockchain. We have to keep a record of it and then work with that later down the line. That is a huge problem for this. There are 54.2 million unspent transaction outputs in Bitcoin. What that means is there are 54.2 million transactions sat there that at any point in time someone can come and say, I'm going to spend that. And each of these has to have an address and a value. So the address is the one that can spend it and the value is how much is there. And if we think about that, that's a lot of memory. In fact, if you do the calculation, it's 25 bytes for an address, 8 bytes for an amount. Let's assume that everything's 100% efficient, which it's not, and we need 1.8 gigabytes of storage just to store the amount of money everyone has in Bitcoin. That's not going to happen on your ARM Cortex M1. So you don't want to try and do that on a Cortex or any type of little IoT device. You need to, effectively outsource this sort of processing to a server somewhere. And now that means you need to connect to a server and trust that the server is going to act in your interests. It's not really practical to hold 2 gig of unspent transactions and then parse every block that comes in. So every block in Bitcoin is 1 megabyte. And a block comes in every 10 minutes. So you've got 10 minutes to process the block, and you're going to receive, 1 megabyte every 10 minutes, so 6 megabytes every hour. You can do the calculations with that. So is there an easier way? Well, hopefully. If we can trust, the network in quotes, if we can trust someone else, if we can trust a server, then we can use simple payment verification. So this is a way that we can avoid downloading every single transaction and block and all those things and pulling it into our little IoT node, so your poor little Cortex-M1 doesn't have to churn through these megabytes of data. We can just download the transactions that actually relate to us. And that would actually be quite nice, because we could say, right, I am this doorknob, and I only need to care about things that affect me as a doorknob. There are privacy issues of this, but people have solved it. You can kind of tell the server in a nice, clever way that we'll not talk about because it's disgusting math that I don't understand either. But it does all sorts of things, and it pulls the information in, and it can tell you only transactions that should affect you. And there'll be a few false positives, but it's okay, it's not a big deal. It lets you verify those transactions. The problem is, we have to trust everyone else to verify. And in blockchain, there's no bank to go to and put your hand up and say, I got scammed if something goes wrong. So you have to be really certain about what's going to happen. And this is the kind of key message to take away from today in terms of blockchain, if you are wanting to work with it in any sense of IoT. You can't trust other people. Whether it's malice or whether it's just good intentions but bad execution. There was a time, this was 4th of July 2012, I think, and there was a bit of a mix-up in the blockchain, and transactions got approved in the blockchain that weren't valid because they didn't have the right signatures on them. But miners accepted them and put them in blocks. So if you were reading those blocks, you'd think they were valid unless you went and validated each and every single one. Any block with an invalid transaction is completely invalid. So any legitimate transactions in that block got reversed. If your transaction was in there, the one that gave you the money, you've got a problem. So in that case, they were suggesting you waited for 6 hours during that incident before you ever accepted that any money had actually reached you. It's quite a long time if you're thinking about doing anything in real time with blockchain. As I said, people are lazy, miners are lazy, they'll do whatever makes them the most money. And in that case, they decided that they would make the most money if they just made blocks without checking them, because checking them was slow, so they didn't bother to check them. Yeah, no, that's not a good idea. So if it's too hard for miners, it's going to be a bit tough for our IoT device. So we don't want to try and verify everything. If we want to verify, if miners are checking the blocks, then confirmations will help. So when we've got a block, if someone else comes along and produces another block on top of our block, they're vouching for that block being valid. And if enough people do it, we can say, well, it's probably valid. But that means that we have to make sure that they're checking everything for us. You get a confirmation every 10 minutes. You'll not get it any sooner than that. What that means is we can't do anything in real time if we're going to wait for these confirmations. Real time is something that's quite nice because it's good for user experience. It's really good if someone can make a payment and get their beer here and now. Imagine trying to buy a beer with Bitcoin. When it takes 6 confirmations, 60 minutes to buy a beer, nobody's going to do it. If we're at risk of forks in the blockchain, though, like if something's going wrong, we could be talking 6 hours before you can really be confident that the transaction is actually going through. So you have to really make a call as to how much money is at stake. Is it £1 or is it £100,000? Because there's going to be a significant difference in how long you're willing to wait. So you need to balance this based on the risks. So you really need, if you are trying to integrate with the blockchain in any way, you need to be balancing risks in terms of how long are we going to wait, what are we actually going to check, are we going to talk directly to the blockchain, or are we going to have some trusted intermediary, are we going to build our own intermediary and then just talk straight to it, running on a server somewhere in the cloud, or are we going to use a third-party payment processor to do that for us? One final challenge to talk about in blockchain is which chain. You think of it, why would we have to ask which chain? Of course, it's the blockchain. Well, no. Actually, if you rely on someone else to read the blockchain, how can we make sure you're seeing the legitimate chain? Because anybody can make their own one and put their own data in it. So, this could be a problem. The right chain in blockchain is the longest chain that exists. So they all started at the same point back in history, and the right one is the one that's longest. And those are the rules. And everyone agrees to follow them. But if you're not seeing the full chain, you don't know that what you're seeing is up to date or even on the chain at all. Someone else can make their own one, and so long as they follow most of the rules, you'll not spot it. So you can trick someone to follow a valid but short chain. I'll show you a picture of that in a second, but nobody else is going to recognize these transactions took place. But your poor little IoT device sitting on its Cortex-M1 that's only powering up every hour or two to solve things and check, it might get fooled into giving someone something that they shouldn't be getting access to. And that would let you double spend. So in double spend, effectively someone transfers the money to you in one transaction, but they keep that in a little secret chain that they're only going to show you. Meanwhile, in the real chain that they're going to show other people, what they do is they actually transfer the money back to themselves. And then if that one ever gets out, it will be rejected because it's already been spent. So you didn't get your money. So bit of a problem there. So in IoT, well, it's going to be difficult to get blockchain embedded fully in IoT. Blockchain is really a bit of a buzz. I'm still going to say it. Blockchain is a solution in dire need of a problem. If anyone finds a problem, then there's lots of people who'd like it written on the back of a postcard and sent to them. IoT devices realistically are going to need to trust some centralized entity, whether it's yours, whether it's someone else's, to actually do the difficult processing for them. Your IoT device, you really don't want that to use blockchain directly. You're going to have a lot of problems in doing so in terms of performance, in terms of the amount of CPU time, in terms of even the actual capabilities in that CPU you're going to need. You're going to need to run a full operating system. You're going to need to run a full Bitcoin client. It doesn't make sense if you want to do anything in power efficient. But that'll save you from being scammed, and that's really quite important because you don't want to end up with someone just scamming you and making you think you've got money when you've not. The worst case scenario is you've got an ATM machine, for example, and someone can come to the ATM and withdraw cash by transferring bitcoins to it. This could be quite fun, couldn't it? So here's the real blockchain, and here's the blockchain that server is showing you. So that server you thought you could trust, well, if you can't trust it, it's showing you these transactions here. They're never going to be in the real network. So you're getting shown that. Oh dear. You get fooled into thinking that it's transferred the money to you, and actually the money's just been, it never got to you, but you think it does, so you've just given them cash and they've run. So it's easy to send data to put into the chain, but it's not easy to read it back and verify you get paid. If you can trust someone else to do it, then you're good. But what about power consumption? So I mentioned power consumption earlier on, but it's easy to be low power if you can only wake up to transmit. It's quite simple, because you can power everything down. Examples of this would be LoRa. Andrew will be talking about LoRa. Class A devices in LoRa, they only wake up to talk. Sigfox, another technology, does basically the same thing. All the other low power, wide area network things, they do the same sort of thing. They wake up, they talk, they shut down. And Wi-Fi, if you build it that way, can actually do this too. So we'll quickly look at here. Sometimes more is less. So when it comes to power consumption, we could use these ESP8266 modules. You can buy them online on eBay and places like that. They're really, really cheap and they're really good, but they're pretty high power drain. We're talking about 120 milliamps of current drain when you use them, 320 at peak. You can actually get up to about 320 actually running them as well sometimes. But 70 when you're scanning for network, which is not brilliant. But 40 when you're connected and idle. The manufacturer says 10 microamps, which would be pretty good when it's in deep sleep, but nah, it's not. I've never managed to get it to that, and it's really buggy and it crashes and it reboots and it just doesn't work at that level. So can we do better? Well, let's get an MSP430. Really cheap little chips from TI, pretty nice, but they last for years on a watch battery when they're in sleep mode. They've got loads of GPIO, loads of ports that we can plug into things, so we can use these to actually control the power pins on other chips. So you can add a real-time clock with a crystal, and you've got interrupts that are individually switchable on pins. So that's really good ways to save power if you're building a piece of equipment. So let's add that chip. I just took that one because it's the cheapest, smallest, lowest power one. We're talking microamps per megahertz if you're actually going to use it, but when it's asleep, you get 0.7 of a microamp. So that's pretty low power. That's going to last a long time. And then we use the GPIO to wake and sleep the Wi-Fi module. That gives you really low power Wi-Fi. There's a graph there just to compare it. If you look at, that's the kind of normal, just use an ESP module. This is the one here for if you're going to use an MSP430 with it as well. So you can see that over different periods of transmission, this is how often it's transmitting. The less you transmit, so if you just need to wake up to send something, you can get some really pretty good power consumption here compared to just doing it normally. And the less you wait, the better. So low power blockchain, you only want to wake up when you need to transmit. Bloom filter sent to the server, then it can just tell you what you need to receive. Check flows every now and then. Ideally though, use some sensors to trigger your MSP430 to wake up the main chip to look. Because if you can tell, for example, that you only need to look at the blockchain when someone's trying to open the door, then you don't need to wake up and do anything at another time. It's even more power. Offload everything to microcontroller if you're taking sensor data, measurements, any sort of thing, telemetry, that sort of thing. Gather those, batch them up, store them in the MSP430, and when you need to send them, wake the chip up once and send it out. And that's pretty much you, but you need to trust the server's going to act in your interests though, so you might need to build it yourself or have a business relationship with the person that's doing it. So in conclusion, it's really easy to send to the blockchain. It's quite nice, you can get nice properties out of it, you can have logs, nobody can break, nobody can change, nobody can tamper with, but it might not be practical, especially if you consider transaction fees in the blockchain itself. You can read and validate things, but it's pretty complex. There's a lot of challenges in going to do so, and you're going to need to think about running a service that's going to do this in the cloud or on your own server somewhere, and then connect into that and make sure you're doing that securely so no one can pretend to be that server. Network connectivity can be tricky to get working at low power, but it is possible. We've done it. Get a second microcontroller and use that to control the chip enable pin on the Wi-Fi module. You'll get really good power consumption like that. But let's be careful, because blockchain is really cool technology, but people are often using it with actually, substantial amounts of money, real cash. So IoT is really bad at the moment about software updates and security. It's a pet hate of mine. We need security updates, we need software updates, but in blockchain, you really, 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 really need it, because there are things that happen, there are changes that happen, there's some that are coming soon, and you need to have timely software updates onto your IoT devices in order to keep yourself in sync with the blockchain. If you don't, then other people are going to be accepting transactions you reject, or vice versa. You'll get out of sync and you'll not have a clue what's going on, and people will be getting free service from you because they'll be putting transactions in that you accept and no one else does. There's a potential for 2 forks in the blockchain to come up in the next little while, I think before August or so SegWit and SegWit 2, and there's all sorts of politics and bickering between the two of them. But there's chances for fairly significant changes, and your device will need to follow these. And this is not a one-off. There's going to be more, so getting good updates out to devices is really important. So if you're going to do anything with blockchain or IoT, stay safe, be cautious, patch regularly. 2 big buzzwords. There is some nice potential there, but just be careful. Thanks.
So, we will cover some of the knowledge gaps during the panel Q&A, because some of that may have made sense to some people and others like, whoa. My view, my personal view, well, I think it's growing consensus that Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain was really version 1.0. It's like Netscape 1.0, or maybe Sprite Mosaic, which was the very first web browser. And it was designed as a decentralized, immutable, trustless store of value. So the analogy is it's a little bit like a virtual cryptocurrency version of gold, in a sense, where there's no sort of central government or central bank controlling the exchange. And there are all sorts of ethical and political issues associated with that. But I'm not personally interested in cryptocurrency. I'm interested in the underlying functionality of how the cryptocurrency works, i.e. the blockchain, and how that decentralized, peer-to-peer, decentralized technology can be applied to connected devices, in other words, IoT. And therein lies the problem. The Bitcoin blockchain wasn't really designed for that purpose. Hence, we've moved on, and we've got equivalents such as Ethereum,
which is still a private blockchain. It still enables you to transact virtual currencies such as Ether, but it's more designed for smart contracts and connecting devices. And even now Ethereum is starting to look a little bit old hat with new developments that actually do away with the blockchain entirely, or use some sort of sharding process to solve that problem of scalability that you were talking about earlier. So IOTA is one of them, and there's another one, EOS, that everyone is raving about right now. It's only been around for like a week or something. It's just insane how fast this particular area is moving. But I promise you this, strip out all the technicalities, what we're about to see is the dawn of a brand new kind of machine-to-machine, fully autonomous, fully decentralized internet. So bye-bye Amazon, goodbye Facebook, goodbye Google, because those guys who pretty much control the data that flows through the current web, that is about to become completely decentralized, in my opinion, and fully automated. So we're talking about the dawn of a third kind of web. And the disruption is going to be far greater than the introduction of the internet back in the mid to late 90s. So prepare for some major disruption. It's kind of scary, but actually very exciting at the same time. So, satellites, nano pico satellites that are the size, well, you can hold one in your hand. This is amazing. This is going to blow your mind. So let me hand over. There you go. I mean, this thing, can you imagine practically
5 by 5 by 5.
attach it to a drone, take it up to space. No need for a rocket. Awesome. Let me just give you this mic and hand over to you.
So Paul Voda from Alba Orbital. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Halavoda.
And you're based near Livingston or in Livingston? Whereabouts are you? Pretty local.
Right next to Sheriff Court.
Okay. So, local heroes, I like to call these guys, because they're doing fantastic things and they're just up the road from here. So, round of applause. Thank you so much.
Right, give me a minute. There you go.
So you're launching nano satellites into space.
Yep.
Using a Chromebook.
Using a Chromebook, yeah.
Anything is possible.
It's all possible.
If only we could get a signal.
Only if I could get it working. There we go. Okie dokie. Can't seem to get it working now. Oh, there we go. Can't find the mouse though. Get it full screened. The screen seems to have broken. I bought a cheap Chromebook from Amazon, like from eBay. Who's fixed it? Oh, there we go.
Good to me.
Yeah, so it was. Oh, goodness. Yeah, there we go.
Is your clicker working?
Yeah, the clicker seems to be working. Oh, I just need to pull it over.
Yeah, drag it across. Because it's obviously like, thinks it's like a virtual screen. There you go. There you are.
There we go.
That's it.
There we go. Fantastic. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about LoRa IoT space-based gateways. So the idea is essentially to use a satellite this size, 15 centimeters, 5 centimeters, and 5 centimeters. It's about the size of a bottle of beer. And this would be essentially in space, and it would pick up your IoT devices. Now, today I'm going to talk about who Alba Orbital is. We're based in Glasgow. Going to convince you that space-based IoT networks and gateways are the future. Tell you what on earth I'm talking about, and really talk about what space-based IoT gateways are going to do and what you can do with them. So, about Alba Orbital, was founded by my friend Tom. We've got our first launch on Falcon 9 next year, which is really exciting. We're going to be launching 3 satellites and 1 rocket in one go. Now we aim to democratize space, which is a kind of buzzword for kind of lowering barriers to entry by making satellites so much cheaper. So one of these, well, the smaller one is the lowest priced commercial space platform, and it's also the smallest. So it really allows entrepreneurs and small businesses to make use of space far more than they could before with other space platforms. We've got 11 staff, and we're growing all the time, so very fast-paced place to be. We've developed our platforms in cooperation with ESA, as well as a few other space agencies. So we've been cooperating with the Taiwanese Space Agency, British Space Agency, as well as NASA Ames. And our first missions, which will be going up next year, are mainly to do with in-orbit demonstration, but we've got all sorts of different payloads. So, I didn't mention that. Payload is the stuff that you put in the satellite. So space-based IoT is one of the potential payloads that we're looking at. So, the Unicorn 1, which I've already mentioned, is a 2P satellite, which is 10 centimeters high, 5 by 5, and this kind of sexy picture that we've got of it in space. It's going to be the first LoRa inter-satellite link. So we've got a SimTech module in there, and we've got an S-band patch as well as a turnstile antenna, which is UHF. It's got the same power as Sputnik, so it's only got a 1 watt power budget, and it's super cheap. So if you want one, talk to me and get you one for 200K. Because of it being like Sputnik, we've got a cool poster of it there. Bigger one, Unicorn 2, which I've got in my hand, is 15 centimeters. It's got like a 17 watt peak. This is the one that we've been looking at for space-based IoT as a gateway for Earth communications. Whereas with this, it's more of a kind of IoT within space. So it's one of the sending the signals to larger gateways, whereas that's a gateway. And that's got like active pointing, that's got all this kind of stuff that you need in order to create these gateways within space. It's another cool picture. I love all these pictures. So we make Pico satellites, which are 100 to 1 kilogram. Now, the future of this is there's a kind of two strains within space. There's one side to make things much larger, and there's the other to make things much smaller. Now, within space, there's a lot of chat now about IoT within space. So there's a thing called chipsats, which are essentially 10 to about 25 gram satellites. That is essentially a PCB board. Now, there's a lot of companies looking at LoRa networks within space.
And, like I said, there's no PowerPoint. So in some cases, not crop necessarily, but maybe you've got gas pipelines that are running through the Sahara Desert or Alaska, and they're pinging data to say there's a leak, or there's a bit of corrosion here. Again, how do you connect them? You're nowhere near a cell. And the problem is that bouncing data back and forth from satellites is very, very expensive and very power hungry. Yeah. So this is potentially, if you can use this technology with low orbit satellites very, very cheaply, you can have global, so it doesn't matter if you're in the North Atlantic, the Sahara, ubiquitous connectivity.
All you need is to be able to see the sky, and you can potentially send data up with LoRa. I'm not actually sure of the frequency. I'm not a radio guy.
Well, it depends, yeah, in terms of latency, and we actually covered that last night because we had a guy from Sigfox, but honestly, what would you say?
LoRa's 868 megahertz.
Okay. So I think
there's multiple frequencies that you can broadcast at. There's a bit of flexibility there.
But generally, it depends on the requirement. So, for example, silly example, pot plant. You can actually have a smart pot plant that will actually ping you, and you get a notification on your smartphone, your smartwatch to say, "Hello, I need watering." Now, if there's an hour delay, or even 24-hour delay, what is the worst thing that can happen? You get home, your pot plant's died. However, if this is a sensor that's embedded on an oil rig, they're talking about dark factories and dark oil rigs where there are no human beings because everything is fully autonomous, run by machines. So drones will buzz around oil rigs, they'll inspect, they'll repair, maybe they'll have a 3D printer on board, so they'll be actually able to repair on the fly. No humans required. Now, if there's a fire, you want that data to be sent immediately. Not an hour later, not 24 hours later, and that's where you don't want latency and where it's absolutely vital that that signal gets through. So that's, again, something that you could potentially solve that an LPWAN, a low power wide area mesh network, may not, because it'll take time for the signal to filter through. But like crops, if you're monitoring crops, same thing. If there's massive latency and it takes a few days even for a signal to reach back to say all crop levels need to be managed, then it's not really a big drama. Go for it.
Network do you need? Say a private company wanting to invest, as you said, $2 grand each. How many do you need up there to provide constant coverage?
Well, you'd need a constellation, so you'd need more than one satellite, of course. Now, the best way to do it would be to have lots of different satellites and lots of different orbits. So what's called LTANs. So you'd be able to get essentially a satellite to go over every 90 minutes. Like a satellite would pass every 90 minutes, but by having a different LTAN, it means that you've got all different times of the day. You'd probably need at least 4 satellites to have a good coverage of the Earth within a polar orbit. With LoRa, it sends out in bursts. I think it's every 90 minutes. Is that correct?
Depends on your setup.
Yeah.
90 minutes should be about right.
Yeah, as far as census, I think Stephen at Census told me 90 minutes. But yeah, so for it to be as efficient as possible, you'd need as many as you can throw up.
Cool. Let's take a quick break. And then we've got Simon to talk about smart cities. Are the snacks out there? I'm not even sure. Yeah, I think there are maybe some nuts and nibbles on that table. And we'll get started with speaking, and then we'll do the Q&A, and then let's have some more drinks after that.
that good?
Great.
There's a few stragglers out there. Are they coming through, or?
I'll go and grab the stragglers.
Hey. Yes. Is that better? I'm just so used to being next to my laptop.
Sorry about that, guys. Okay. Let's get the show on the road. Sorry, Simon.
You okay?
You're good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
All
good.
right. Well, I mean, no introduction necessary.
Cool.
Good round of applause.
Thank you. Great. Thanks very much. So, so I'm Simon Tricker. I'm co-founder of Urban Tide, and I'm going to take you through a little bit of a story around smart cities, and then that's going to kind of lead into urban AI and really the potential that I can kind of see in that space. I'm not an expert on AI by any means, but I'm really, really fascinated by the potential of what this means. And the same with IoT, not an expert, but really fascinated by what it means. Let's get my clicker working. So before I dive into that, I just thought it'd be good to kind of step back and basically set out how the world is and is fastly changing to become basically massively urbanized. So this is the world population in 1990, and we're looking at the urbanized population here. So the dark blue is greater than 75%, and the light blue is 50 to 75% urbanized. And then as we track forward, you can then see 2010, America, South America, and Europe are pretty much flipped over to become greater than 75% urbanized. India and China still got a long way to go, still at the, not even halfway. And then as we track through again, we can see China start to pop up, Nigeria start to pop up massively. I think Nigeria is a really fascinating kind of use case in there. Turkey as well, tipping over Iran. And then we get to 2050, you can kind of see the world there. You can really make out the shape of the world. But the interesting points there is that China and India still haven't tipped over to become greater than 75% urbanized. So this is really the challenge of our time. Like, how do we deal with this? This is really this is really where smart cities have kind of born out of, is to try and deal with this change. To put it in perspective, London has a tube train of new people arriving every week. So every week the tube train arrives, and they all need to live somewhere, they all need housing, they all need educating, they all need jobs, they all need power, they all need energy, resources, all of those things. I think Glasgow would probably love to have more of that. I would say so. There's probably more of a need to get people back into the city in Glasgow. And some of this really comes down to these key challenges. So we've got rapid urbanization, I've just demonstrated that. But the key thing that's really changing here is that cities are competing against each other. So people are looking to be, how smart is this city? Do I have, what's the potential I have within moving to this city? So the demographics are really shifting in that way. So the younger demographic are basically looking to a city and saying, I'll move to that city because it is perceived to be a smarter city. I'm going to have more potential, more opportunities there, and then I will find a job. Whereas probably I come from a generation where I would find a job and then that would take me to that city. I'd find a job and I'll go to that city. So that's quite a big demographic shift. Other things that cities are really competing with is obviously they want resources, they need money, they need all of those things to make them thrive. So there's a lot of competition around that space. And the bit that we're really interested in is this data. There's all this data being produced from all these different sources, and it's really like, how do we use that data? How do we get it out? How do we stop it from being locked in silos? So back in 2012, Glasgow won an Innovate UK competition to be a future city, a demonstrator project, and it was across the whole country, basically all the cities across the UK bid for that competition, and Glasgow won it. The co-founders, who I co-founded with, Pippa and Stephen, they helped to write the bid that helped Glasgow to win the money. So it was a very fantastic, it was a great project to then be involved with. And it delivered a number of different things. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's quite an extensive program, but half of the money went on to an operations centre. So this is basically out in the East End, and it's basically managing and running the CCTV cameras, as you can see all there, traffic management and community safety are all kind of housed within this one place. So it brought together a number of different services all into one operations centre. Also, how it runs the maintenance and the intelligent lighting system also feeds into that one operations centre. So intelligent lighting is really the kind of first thing that often you see within a smart city, because it's new LED bulbs, because they're much more energy efficient. So it's a complete no-brainer as a thing to do. But the interesting thing with intelligent lighting is it starts to have other sensors plugged into that. So in Glasgow, there's air quality, footfall, noise, and then potentially some kind of Wi-Fi mesh network as well. And then the thing that obviously all of that produces is vast amounts of data. And one of the core programs within Glasgow was to then do something with all of that data. So it's opening up, how do we open up and share some of this data? So there was a core program called Open Glasgow, which started to then consume some of that data into an open data platform, then do something with that data. So we demonstrated some dashboards. There's an app which is still quite crappy, but it's a step in the right direction, which is trying to make it easier for you to interact with your city when there's a problem, a pothole or littering or issues with your city. And then also some engagement pieces as well, a number of hackathons, a number of community mapping projects to try and bring other sources of data or reuse of data into the program. So a really exciting, interesting project. We then spun out of that in 2014, and it really on that concept of like, how do we make data smart? Like, how do we do something with this data, and how do we empower others to use that data? So since then, we've worked with a whole host of different cities, organizations, and some large PLCs as well. So the core for us is really a smart city is an open city. It's somewhere where you can share and reuse that information, and it's not about technology. Technology is just a component of a smart city. That's not the driver. And to really kind of focus, like how do we make that data more reusable, we've built a data platform. So this is our platform, USmart. So it's basically about enabling our organizations to become smarter with their data. So we can take any data from any source. That's a kind of key thing. Don't care what it is, what form, good, bad, and ugly, you get it all in. And then if you then want to do something with it, then obviously there's more potential once we start to bring it in somewhere. It's about data sharing, so some of that can be open, some of that can be private, some of that can be closed. And really the kind of potential where we can see it going, which is the AI component, is then how do you start to build insight on top of that data? And that's really the kind of interesting area. So we're starting to develop some sort of R&D projects around that space. We work with clients when they're trying to solve specific problems and they've got all this data, then how do they make that more reusable? So I'm not going to go into specifics about this. I want to kind of step back again and kind of look at the kind of three waves of AI as I kind of broadly understand them. So kind of step one is kind of handcrafted knowledge. And this is basically where you need an expert, and he needs to have sort of very logical rules. And the recommendation engines are like perfect examples of kind of AI solutions that are up and running right now. So we don't really know how some search results come to us. There's some AI working in there trying to figure out what is the best result for you. The second stage then is statistical learning. So it's basically taking lots of these different models and really trying to learn what's the best solution. This is where self-driving cars are really operating in. So they're using lots of different predictions to try and learn from, is that a person? What's the risk value on that? So that's really the kind of wave where we are now. And then that seems, so I think there's a lot of potential within urban AI within this space, and self-driving cars proves that. And then the next kind of big wave is contextual adaptation, where it basically discovers for itself. So AlphaGo with Google DeepMind is a prime example of that, where they basically kind of gave it the concept of Go, the Go board, and then let itself learn over and over again, play itself, and then it could basically be world masters because it played millions and millions of games and did some incredible moves that nobody thought were even possible. So I think an interesting one on that one is there's more moves in AlphaGo than there are atoms in the universe. It's that insanely massively complicated, and Google DeepMind beating a human at that is kind of like a 10-year jump in AI. It's quite a profound change. But there's still a whole pile of work, and this is John Launchbarry from DARPA. Basically, a lot of my quotes there are from him, and it's basically there's a whole pile of work still to be done. So what's really kind of helping with this is obviously this exponential growth within computing. That's it's unstoppable. I think the kind of core here is that it doesn't matter when wars happened, when crashes happened, it's irrelevant. Basically, this curve is ongoing, and the prediction is human intelligence by 2029. So if you think 10 years ago, I think it was today, 10 years ago today, the iPhone launched. So 12 years from now, we could have an intelligent computer that's as intelligent as us. So it's quite a profound change, which is really happening right now. So autonomous vehicles, those are obviously the ones that we're kind of getting lots of press about, lots of interest around those areas, and this is an example of how an autonomous vehicle starts to see the world. I've put the question marks because it's a little bit unknown. Like every time you read something, it's going to be this year or it's going to be this year. I think fully autonomous, where there's no steering wheel, is 2022, 2025. But Tesla is saying at the end of this year they're going to do a state-to-state journey without the driver touching the wheel. So from one side of the state to one side of America to the other side of America at the end of this year. So, and it's because they're basically machine learning. They're testing out their software all the time while drivers are driving. So they're sort of they're self-learning. So from an urban side, this obviously has profound change on how the cities are built. What's the fabric of our cities when we've got all of these new autonomous vehicles driving around? So this is an example of an American city, and it's basically 20 to 30% is used up by parking. So that's a lot of space, which is kind of suddenly becomes freed up for other activity, not just parking cars that sit there for 95% of the time. The kind of car ownership concept is, I think, going to, again, profoundly change. It seems like a crazy concept that we spend thousands of pounds to buy them, thousands of pounds to run them, thousands of pounds to insure them, thousands of pounds, and all they do is sit there. If we had any other asset that was used in that same way, we would kind of get rid of it. So it's going to change, and mobility as a service is the concept that's obviously coming through, and that's another core component of smart cities. Obviously, we want to make them secure. Yeah. This is the potential of, this is a great clip from Fast and Furious 8. If you haven't seen it, the zombie cars. So obviously we've got to make sure that they are secure so that we don't end up. So that kind of then leads me on to the next kind of component of what AI will mean is automation. So, and I think this is probably, I think it probably will be. It's going to be one of the shortest careers. How long has an Uber driver been around? And then there's literally, how long is it going to be before you don't see that figure in front of you? It's going to be an autonomous vehicle. It's not that long. It's not that far away at all. So what does that then mean? So this is actually a report just a couple of days ago that's from the Future of Employment. They've kind of 30% of tasks across 60% of occupations are going to have the potential to be automated. And there's some list of the least safe jobs within that. So I hope none of you are in that space, because it's obviously not looking particularly a really robust type of employment. And then the interesting then is the safest. So this is really kind of points to the future, that it's the human interaction which is the important component, not the task. So a lot of our tasks that we do every day are very repetitive, and obviously this is much more personal. So maybe there'll be this shift where the personal interaction will be valued at much higher than it currently is. You think how much a nurse or some of these people get paid. They don't get paid a great deal compared to some of the other more automatable tasks. So there's quite a profound shift there. I think this is a great little visualization tool. Again, you can have a play with it. So McKinsey brought this little tabular tool, so you can basically look at the different sectors and the potential of the automation potential of those different tasks. And the kind of statement at the top, AI is blind to the worker's collar, so it's going to affect every type of work that we currently participate in: blue collar, white collar, and management. So this is maybe, I kind of feel a little bit like this in a startup where you're basically doing 7 or 8 different things all at the same time, but across simultaneously, trying to work with different companies doing different things all the time. So I think this is potentially where the future may be going for us, is where we're having to juggle. We need a big skill set. It's not just a case of being niche in one thing. You need to be able to be good at multiple different things. Or we look at new forms of income. So there's some nice, interesting ideas emerging with this. This basic income concept, or universal income, and it's great to see Glasgow are exploring that. This is a study. It's quite a small study, but I think it started in spring this year. So we'll see what the results are. But it is to try and change the way that we think about giving welfare money and having a fundamental basic income, so that you can do some of the more human important tasks, taking care of your family, taking care of others around you, and the automation starts to get done by machines. So just kind of the last couple of slides now. This is really, I think, where the IoT component probably comes in, and where we're really starting to see this kind of AI and IoT, and the kind of AI will kind of sit alongside our tasks. It will support our tasks. It won't replace everything. It will just kind of support. So this is a worker, and he's obviously, his HoloLens type headset there is feeding him information that's obviously relevant to that specific task. And that's really the kind of first wave that we're going to see within. And we've kind of got that already. We all carry around smartphones, and that augments some of our tasks, and it's just going to become more heads up. I think then obviously the kind of goal, especially within smart cities, is to go from reactive to predictive. We're trying to predict the future all the time. We want to predict when that thing's going to fail. We want to predict the effect of that gully being full of water, how that will then impact on a city. So there's obviously a lot of money and a lot of investment going into that space, how we can sort of predict the future. Or we can kind of look at this hyper reality. This is a kind of I think a really crazy kind of example, but it's also interesting, like city points there. Collect your city points for using public transport, rate your driver. These are all things that we kind of do, with our various devices. But this is obviously coming heads up, points of interest again, and this is I think quite a fun, it is hyper reality example of. I don't think the future will quite look like this. I'm worried if it does, but I won't be surprised if some of this does start to filter through. You can see with AR, augmented reality, kind of really where it's starting to go, and yeah, the kind of shopping experience as well. Get bonus points for doing your shopping. Anyway, the links are up here, so I'll share the slides with you later. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So my kind of 3 takeaways from tonight's talk is that data is everywhere. That's the underlying component of all of this. It's just masses of amounts of data coming from all these different sources, and it's really about how do we do something with that data. That's really one of our key challenges. AI is here. We're not waiting for it. It's here right now. It's impacting on our lives every day, and it's only going to get more profound and more impactful. And obviously, this is the key component. Is really its huge ethical and policy changes are going to have to be discussed and decided. The self-driving cars is quite a profound impact that will have. It's going to have to make a choice between saving the driver and killing somebody, or killing the driver and saving that person. And those are choices it's going to have to decide. And then who's liable for that choice? Is it the software company? Is it the car company? Is it the insurance? It's a complex area, and this is all going to play out. And technology is just marching forward. The exponential growth is going to continue to happen, and policy is going to have to try and keep up with it. Thank you.
You win a prize for most beautiful slides. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Okay, so what I like to do now is scare you a little bit in terms of what we're about to discuss, challenge you, possibly blow your mind, because I want to paint a scenario. Let's grab the seats that are propping up your cable right now. Hold on, whoa, don't touch that's going to freak, but essentially these will put to the side because we're going to do a little sort of Q&A. So, you guys grab a seat, but let me just paint a picture for you. Moving on from the machine automation scenario of the driverless car, does the onboard algorithm select to drive off a bridge and kill the passenger and avoid the cluster of young kids walking along the side of the bridge? Or does it save the driver and murder a few children? Someone's got to engineer the algorithm to make that decision. So, my solution, one solution, is to almost have it like a black box sort of God algorithm where it just generates a random outcome. So no one is essentially to blame. So it's kind of how the real world today works. Lawyers probably won't go for that, but anyway, that's one solution that I thought of that no one else seems to be discussing. Exactly. Oh, there you go. So this scenario. So I've been looking at automation, smart contracts, and DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. Now, I don't know when it was, someone perhaps can tell me, but there was a point in time where corporations were given the same rights and status as a living person.
US today.
When did that happen? We're talking 30s, 20s, 50s? The point is that corporations have the same sovereign rights as individuals, as living, breathing people. Now, distributed autonomous organizations, DAOs, mean that you'll have machines that are literally born with a virtual wallet, an identity, and they'll be fully autonomous entities. Now, the driverless car is a perfect example. So it's born into the world, it goes off, and it starts operating in terms of making a living. So it's picking up passengers. So it's generating cryptocurrency. It can use that cryptocurrency to purchase energy, so it drives itself to a charging point. It can purchase maintenance, spare parts, so it drives itself to a depot to get maintained, and on and on and on. Now, in the meantime, it's generating a lot of revenue. Now, there are other distributed autonomous machines that can swarm together and start cooperating. So, for example, there will be a car, maybe it's just had a puncture or blowout. It'll send out an alert to other machines, maybe they're drones, to say, I will, essentially like a bid, a call to action to say, can someone in the area come and repair me? And so there'll be a bid between all these autonomous organizations, and a decision will be made by the AI agent, and the repair will be done, and then the drone will fly off and go about its and the problem with that is that machines will increasingly become far better at generating wealth for themselves by playing the stock market and doing things en masse and cooperating. And so that's the sort of scary real world scenario that, from a technical point of view, is not that far away. The good world scenario is that using the same smart contracts and automating at source some form of tax using micro or nano transactions, so that every single point at which value is created is taxed. Suddenly we sit back, these machines are generating vast wealth that's being taxed, and suddenly the NHS is overflowing with cash. Because the government doesn't have these vast departments trying to tax people and collect the tax and administrate. All those people have been fired now. The government becomes an autonomous entity, AI instead of politicians, and so on and so forth. So suddenly we've got this massive abundance of wealth, and we're left with a situation where no one actually has any kind of job to do, because we all have a universal basic income, right? Because we're washed with cash, because we've got this new machine economy that's just like a money-making machine. What the heck are we going to do with our lives? That's the good world scenario. The bad world scenario, of course, is the Terminator outcome, where they become sentient and start sort of conspiring against us. So there you go. So what do you think? Is that insane? Is that realistic? What sort of timeline are we talking about?
Yeah, I think it's. I think there's probably there's a nice utopian kind of potential with what you're describing there. I think probably first wave will be Ubers will become like fleet management will be the first kind of phase. Owning cars and owning those assets will become a fleet management project, and then whether that fleet management then starts to become an AI that's kind of self-running. I listened to an interesting.
Excuse me a sec, can we power down the projector? This is kind of. If you close that, you're just going to get like blue light. We just that's. Yeah, well done, Al. Sorry, carry on, Simon. Continue.
There's nice concepts around Amazon. So Amazon basically with their algorithm starting to learn what we like to consume. Obviously, just bought whole foods recently for whatever was $9 billion. So basically, every week you'll get a box of stuff that it thinks you want, and a box to put stuff in that you didn't want. And then self-learning that machine will obviously start to self-learn what it is you do want every week and what it is you don't want every week. And then the concept of having to go shopping comes.
See, this is the dilemma. I love the utility of most of the products that Google provides me day to day. In fact, many of them I do rely on. And likewise of Amazon and all those other products. But this kind of false choice of, in order to have access to these products, you've got to hand over huge swathes of personal information. There doesn't seem to be an alternative. That is the current status quo. It's either one or the other. Now, that I believe there is another way.
So 12th, that alternative is coming. So 25th of May 2018, GDPR, new regulation takes effect. And what that regulation effectively does is unbundles service provision from consent. So when someone wants to use your personal information, they will have to have grounds to process it. And those grounds can include a contract or consent or public interest, i.e., public safety, public health, not spreading infectious diseases. So what that really means is you need consent or you need a contract. And consent is going to be the big one because contracts are governed by all manners of horrible rules and laws. But people will have the ability to give granular consent. So at some point you will see this, you'll go to sign into Gmail, provided they don't decide to cast themselves off and end up firewalled out of Europe, because this law is going to take effect across all of Europe. What will happen is you'll log into Gmail one day, they're going to have to give you the right to opt out from your data being used, for example, for advertising. They're not going to be allowed to profile, and you've already seen this came out two days ago. Google are going to stop reading emails in order to advertise, because they realise that GDPR is coming, and they're going to have to separate.
General Data Protection Regulation.
General Data Protection Regulation is coming. It's an EU regulation and it's going to take effect before any kind of Brexit stuff. So it will apply. And if you go down to Westminster and speak to the right people, you will hear that it's going to apply beyond, because we're not planning to get rid of it. And it effectively gives you rights back over your data again. And in fact, Queen's speech has included something to that effect as well.
Yeah, I think it's utter nonsense, personally. Nanny state intervention. And we're going to be back in the situation of, those irritating pop-ups? Oh, cookies. Yes, we know, click, carry on. Every flipping app you come across, there's going to be a pop-up saying, yeah, we're mining your data, we need your permission, and you've got to actually read the small print.
That's the change. That doesn't
no,
work.
essentially get rid of the centralization and the technology. Use blockchain like decentralized technologies to prevent companies from being able to access your private information in the first place. It's technology that's the solution, not government flipping intervention. Sorry.
Yeah. Regulation has foreseen this. So you have to make it as easy to not give consent as to give consent. So you can't say, you give consent and you can withdraw consent by sending us a notarized fax to a premium rate number. Doesn't count, doesn't cut it. Lawyers would love it, but no, sorry. So giving consent has to be as easy as not giving it. And they can't continually prompt you. The cookie regulation is being replaced. There's now a new e-privacy directive going to come in the same day. And what it does is it gives you the same protections over electronic communications like WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype, as it does to regular telecommunications. So right now, the electronic internet-based services are not actually governed by any regulations that cover telecoms. So you can do what they like in terms of privacy. But but there are actually quite strict regulations around how telecommunications work. And as of, I think it'll be the same date, the new e-privacy directive, which is going to come in partnership with the GDPR. So the e-privacy directive is going to replace the broken cookie policy nonsense that they now all recognise was stupid with something that actually works. And it gives you, you'll have one of the interesting ones for you, Simon. Machine-to-machine communications get rights. Machines are being given rights in a new regulation to privacy.
So let me just, as an example, storage. Amazon currently owns, is this still filming? Okay. Amazon owns almost 50% of the entire enterprise storage hosting market. Okay? There's a lot of data flowing through their servers. Okay. So essentially, that's a lot of information, and therefore you need regulation. And what the GDPR is there to do is if they are hacked or they use their information without your consent and so on and so forth, they need these seriously draconian legislations in the form of if you are Amazon, for example, and you're proven to be responsible for a hack which leaks a lot of personal data, the EU can fine them 4% of global turnover, or 20 million euros, whichever is the greater, and all those that were affected by the hack. It's open season to sue Amazon. So
class action. Yeah.
The TalkTalk hack could have taken down TalkTalk under the GDPR, and that company could be exited. Yeah. So I think there are going to be some huge ramifications.
It's interesting from the city's perspective. Talking to various cities, they're all kind of going.
Right, absolutely.
How do we deal with this?
How do we deal with this?
Because if they do get fined, then that would take out service.
Yeah.
So it's an entire service.
So, what I'm saying, and I agree, I think it's not going to be the Googles and the Facebooks and the Apples of this world, because in some senses they're above the law. Maybe one could argue. It's actually the small to medium-sized enterprises that will fall foul, and perhaps they'll want to make some examples of them and so on and so forth. Even academics and charities, if they're containing and they get hacked, they could fall foul of this as well. So everyone should be very, very afraid, and as a result it may actually hamper innovation, because startups will be so terrified of falling foul they won't get funding. So the VC will say, well, can you guarantee you're not going to get fall foul of GDPR? And of course they'll say, well, no, we can't guarantee it, because there's always, based on the central model, a honeypot of data. No matter how well it's protected, it can always be potentially hacked. So the alternative is to use a distributed network of millions or billions of edge devices. It could be smart light bulbs, it could be smartphones, it could be any smart device manufactured today by default will have the equivalent of what, an iPhone 4 or iPhone 5? Yeah, because of the scales of economy, you have a bunch of connected devices installed, it'll be the equivalent of a smartphone embedded. And that's just your smart light. So there's a lot of excess capacity out there that could potentially be used as a distributed storage device. So, like I said, there's no honeypot of data, because suddenly you've got distributed storage, and there are companies already doing this, where your data is cropped into small, tiny components, possibly using the blockchain, that are hashed, so there's nowhere for the hackers to go. So the data is stored in tiny little components, distributed and fully encrypted globally around the world, and that's just completely disrupted Amazon's most profitable, by a long margin, source of income.
Yeah, so
so the GDPR doesn't apply because there's no hacking and there's no data being exploited.
Yeah, that is the way to do it. MadeSafe is a company based down in Trout, and they've been doing this for quite some time. And my PhD topic was on securing that. So they've been working on this for quite a while, and they've built something that means that your data doesn't need to be stored in any one place. You split it up, you store it in 4 different people's computers. Coin is a new coin that came out a few months ago, I think, and it's effectively going to offer you storage at something like 1/12 of the price of Amazon. So Amazon will charge you roughly $12. I think it's $12 a month for a terabyte of storage. Their prices are currently about $1 a month for a terabyte of storage, based on their coin. So effectively, you have a smart contract that says, I will provide you with this much storage for this much money. You pay it, you use it. If they lose it, they're liable, because they have to put up a kind of collateral in advance. And it means that you don't have to store your data in one place, you store it across the world. So when one country gets knocked out of the internet, you're good.
Because these distributed denial of service attacks are causing havoc. We're talking about strategically important national assets like power stations, again, because they're holding their data in a centralized server, being taken out by these massive distributed denial of service attacks. I think we just need to look at, just rethink the way that the internet actually currently operates. But the trouble is there are a few very, very, very powerful stakeholders that really don't want to see things change. So
if you look at the evolution, Web 1 was, hey, we've got this idea of a web. Let's connect our computers to the internet. Let's talk. Let's do things. Web 2 was the API model. So Web 2 was the API, but actually it was a silo. So it was originally, hey, we'll give you an API, and you can now scrape the Twitter API, but we're keeping the data. And people have now started to realize, so every social network is through a curve. The rapid growth, the freedom, the do what you want, that we don't really pay attention. Then they start to regulate, then they peak out because they become less cool because your parents are using it and kids don't want to use it, and that's actually the market you can go for. Next thing you know, they're on a decline, so they have to monetize. How do you monetize? Because the VC either wants to see money or growth. So when you can't give them growth, you give them money. So you monetize, you ram ads down people's throat. Your previously sequential timeline becomes semi-sequential, but with the bits that someone paid to show you getting rammed in all over the place. Then you see this decline, the slump, then the death. So you've got all these bits.
MySpace, anyone? Vito? Guys, do you have any questions? This is kind of hardcore, it's just a bit philosophical. After a few beers, I tend to do that. And there is money behind the bar, by the way. So we're going to shut down this conversation here, but by all means, please continue drinking.
Yeah, but for example, you see with Ethereum and everything, you still need to design the actual contract itself. So GDPR still may apply because you have designed the contract. So if you designed a system which still failed, if I managed to exploit your system, which was not centralized.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is still this point of like,
point of failure.
Yeah,
well, apps that are not fully distributed, the distributed apps that run on Ethereum are not purely actually distributed,
of course not.
Rather ironically. And that there
it's
are
the same as cloud, it's not a cloud.
it's
there is
not
no
pure
cloud, it's
distributed.
someone
They're
else's
working on it.
PC.
They're working on it. But yeah, absolutely. So what, do you have an opinion on this, or?
Not particular, I just like satellites.
So it could be a game, but seriously,
it's like, well, if you're actually talking about buying a satellite from us.
If you're facilitating connectivity for the world,
you're literally a cloud.
Yeah,
you are a distributed cloud structure.
Above the clouds.
So, but do you have like a philosophical, ethical standpoint, or you really just like whatever? We don't
want to put things in space. So yeah, I mean, we're actually quite agnostic about what kind of platforms people are putting in there, and I mean, the whole AI debate is a bit kind of, I don't really get it, and it becomes very philosophical in terms of, are you going to go canteen with your machines? Are you going to have a kind of utilitarian approach? And that's not really kind of a conversation that I've really approached before, to be honest.
But when you have AI, in your pocket, who does that AI belong to? It kind of belongs to Amazon, belongs to Google, belongs to Apple. I'm not sure that it belongs to you, does it? Yet these devices, or at least the AI that are going to be embedded in your body at some point, are going to be monitoring, controlling every aspect of your life. And you're going to become increasingly reliant on it. So it is quite important, I think, to have this discussion sooner rather than later.
And obviously someone's going to try to marry.
Huh?
Marry it.
Marry, as in marriage?
Yeah.
Well, they're talking about smart contract marriages, where you literally have it on the blockchain, and today I'm married, and the government is informed, and then your taxes are managed in a certain way, and literally next week you're like, okay, smart contract, and everything is fully automated. The divorce, the papers, the tax regime.
For divorce, because you can't hide
done.
assets. All your jobs are gone.
Because it's immutable, and it's transparent, so it will eradicate fraud, theoretically. Yeah, so they're actually, talking about
and then like
theory.
AI marriage, someone will
with devices.
Yeah, so we'll try to do it like in
There's really creepy robots that people are making now. I was watching this kind of documentary about
companionship robots.
I was watching this one documentary that had this really weird Glaswegian accent. It's these American guys. I was like,
they're not fembots. What do they call? They call them something though. They're not androids. They actually have really, and they can actually stipulate every kind of element of their aesthetic appearance. Let's move on from there.
So to jump back to your question there a second ago about GDPR for distributed data, absolutely. So if you look at Android apps, there's a bunch of Android apps that say they encrypt your data. So I went through a pilot, and I think they combined about 100 and something million users, and you can decrypt the data that every single one of them produces because none of them actually encrypted it. So there is definitely going to still be a need, because even though you think it's encrypted, is it actually encrypted? Which comes back to what you were saying, Simon, about who's in control. And unless you can actually use the source code to edit the thing and run it yourself, you're not in control because you don't know what it's doing.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
I think
and obviously with AI, then who's in control of the AI when the AI is self-learning? That's the interesting thing.
just some of these things when you start thinking about it, kind of freak you out a little bit. But it's important. And the trouble is, a lot of people are so busy with their daily lives that thinking time is expensive. It really is, which is thankfully why we have academics. But people need to be thinking about this stuff now rather than later. Like I said before, go for it.
It's just a point on your opinion on the smart cities and stuff. With I don't know who's all developers in the room. I'm guessing a bunch of us, but I guess it's to talk about our responsibility as if these things, we're the ones teaching these things or coding these things, as to make them as diverse as possible, because there's already these examples of the face recognition only recognising Western white guys because that's who the developers are. And I think an example I heard was of the smart cars, but they're not made for people my height because it's people who are a bit taller than me that are making them. So it's just to kind of point out that we have a responsibility to make sure we are building for everyone and not just us.
So you need a wider diversity of people involved, like sociologists, artists, philosophers, who are in charge of ethics. Is that sociology? I don't even know.
That's a good field in itself.
What field is that?
If
you're going to university, which department would ethics be in? Is it business or is it
they have a
philosophy?
separate ethics committee.
You don't go to university and study ethics, you can't get a
philosophy.
PhD in ethics.
philosophy.
It's philosophy.
They were guided by it, but it's just they keep it separate.
See, we've got a problem, and
It's a
here, right?
subfield
Who
of
is
philosophy.
actually responsible for that element of it? And then you've got computers that are going to be self-programming. Literally, coders are going to be out of a job within 10 years for sure.
Got a question for Simon. On one of your slides, it had clergy as being slightly more automatable than God rehabilitation. Why was that?
I think noise margin completely.
Is religion
Faith.
going to be on the blockchain or something?
Yeah. Well, potentially for sure.
But you know the animation with all that busyness and everything, with the augmented stuff,
Yeah.
that YouTube or Vimeo video is actually an ad for the church. It actually ends of the character who's being bombarded by all this crazy information augmented in their kind of virtual world, and then there's an entrance to a church, and it says, "Strip all the technology and find enlightenment." The Church of Christian whatever, I don't even know, Catholicism. But it's an ad for religion, ironically, which is why when I saw clergymen, I thought that.
The funny thing as well is
ironic.
when you compare what you see in that video to what you see if you browse the internet without an ad blocker. Remarkable similarities with rate us now, did you like our app?
Yeah.
Browse with an ad blocker. Kind of thing.
I think of Futurama, the whole kind of automation of religion.
Yeah, it's a brave new world that I remain optimistic anyway. I like my good worldview of these robots being
To help us.
benevolent and wealth creators, so that we can just lie on a beach all day drinking cocktails. That would be phenomenal. Okay, so thank you so much again to Alan Product Forge. Do you like this venue, by the way? I'm hoping they'll be able to give it to us on a regular basis. I don't know. This is just, we're just kind of testing the waters to see how it goes. So Citizen M, the Spring Technology guys had to leave, but essentially they're picking up the tab tonight. So round of applause to our speakers as well. And thank you.
My name's Alex Chandler, I'm a mentor here at the Cancer Data Dive.
We're looking for people to come up with innovative ideas or solutions to the use of cancer data in Scotland.
So we had a Future Health Product Forge back in January. It was really, really interesting. It was such a great environment, and it always amazes me how much happens.
It was great to build on the success of the last Product Forge event that I went to. It's great to see so many people that I recognise, including colleagues that are back. And it's so exciting to be able to combine the open data that we released for that event with the addition of synthetic data.
I'm really enjoying it. I've got a solid team, got a good idea I think, and we're making good progress. Our team's fairly diverse, so I've been to previous hackathons where it was just developers and you don't quite get the industry experience or the industry perspectives because of that.
So when you get to work with other people, get a range of insights, a range of more connections, your hunch actually turns into something else.
I think we're working pretty well together. We all come from quite different levels of knowledge of cancer and data. I think together we're creating something good.
So I was really keen to come along. What I'm surprised about is how quickly the teams have really got to grips with the challenges that people like us face. That's amazing, that's been great.
No, I've never been to a hackathon before. The teams have some brilliant ideas and they're also passionate about it, which is amazing considering most of them only met last night.
And this one is more structured in terms of the way that the teams have been bonding.
And also you get more knowledge on what other technologies can be applied in your field.
This kind of intensive innovation is just new to me. I just think this kind of environment is probably really good at breeding, creativity.
I think a lot of the ideas they came up with in the first 10 minutes are actually good ideas.
We find a good idea and we are going for it, and I feel it's going to make a change.